My name is Jennifer Lynn Giddings, and this is my textile history. This is a photograph of me and my grandmother, Conchetta Mangino, when I was probably around 5 or 6 years old, which is really where I began my textiles journey. I was fortunate that my grandmother decided to teach her only granddaughter a trade that she had been a part of for working and for pleasure throughout her life. So this is me standing over her while she's using her industrial machine. She worked for a garment company making loops for evening gowns from the house. And I actually inherited that machine, so I'm super fortunate to have that to use for myself. So from a very young age, she started me doing very simple cross stitch and different types of hand stitching. So this is one of my early projects that I thought was kind of a great way to start off the slides, where I hand covered this photo album with lace and fabric, and there's some hand cross stitch that was done to title the book Memories, and many of the photos actually that I've included in my slides came out of this album. So I thought that was kind of a really great place to start. So I really began hand stitching and kind of watching my grandmother, and every time we would visit, she would always have a new project ready to go when I would go visit her. She lived in the Bronx, New York, so that's where we would go and visit. So these are some pictures of when I was a little bit older. And the picture on the left, that's actually my grandmother sitting behind me with her little house dress is showing. And I'm holding a needle, and I'm stitching these circle little purses out of braided piping. So piping is, it's like a wrapped cording, and that is the string that my grandmother used to use to make the buttonholes for the dress company that she worked for. So there was always lots of extra piping. So there was all different kinds of things that we would make with the piping. So I thought this picture was also a great representation of me at a younger age with a needle and thread, in my bathing suit, but not in the pool. I'm sitting there sewing something. And then to the right is one Christmas, I received a simple stitch quilting kit from Fisher-Price. So I thought that was significant to my textile journey. And then in the picture on the bottom right, I actually had surgery on my foot when I was in first grade because I was born club-footed and walked on my toes. And off to the right on the blue couch is a little cross-stitch kit that I actually remember very, very vividly putting that together. It had this real cheesy plastic frame, and it actually looks like that is Fisher-Price also. So apparently Fisher-Price used to make some craft hand stitching items, and I might actually research that because I'm curious to see if they still make some of those products. So this next slide is some of my very, very early projects. So I moved from hand stitching to more complicated hand stitching. So below is some cross stitch that I did, and then when I was completed with the cross stitch, I actually made little pillows for my little cousins. So each one has a different one. And the bottom right with my little cousin Alyssa is Minnie Mouse hiding behind Goofy there. And then up to the top right, I used to make a lot of decorations for little nurseries and baby rooms. So I was playing with felt and pinking shears, and it looks like I did do some machine stitching with those. Those are not all hand stitched. So I thought that was important to include. And then the clowns, I made dozens of these clowns, and I gave them as gifts. And this was actually one of my very first projects when I first got my own sewing machine for the first time, that I was moving kind of off of the hand work onto machine work. So I used to make these clowns for anyone that was having a baby, and I would give them at a baby shower. And it was a really great way to kind of play with some different materials, painting the face. I, fooled around with different ways to twist and tie the yarn to make the different hairstyles. There's actually a metal hoop in the overalls to give them some realistic look of what real clowns wear. Ribbon, buttons. The shoes are made out of felt and fabric, and the little pom-poms. So these were really fun. They're kind of ugly, oddly enough, looking at them now, but at the time, it was super fun to go into the fabric store and find all the coordinating fabrics and make these for some gifts. This slide, these are some of my early quilts where I was making for gifts. Actually, it's so crazy. A lot of the pictures of things that I have to show are things that are no longer in my possession because I have made them and given them as gifts. So this is some of my early quilting, and then actually later in some of the other slides, you will see where my quilting has progressed. So this is something that I thought was super exciting to share also, that eventually I started to make garments. So the dress on the left, the magazine, I pulled that picture out of a magazine, and at the time we couldn't find that dress anywhere, and it probably was pretty expensive because I'm sure it was in a fancy magazine. So my grandmother and I did a little bit of research, and we found a pattern that was similar with alterations to make it look like the picture. So that is me for my 9th grade dance, all dressed up in the dress that my grandmother and I put together as a team, with, of course, the big old scrunchie, which was classic during the time. And I remember, all the different steps and stages of us doing this. So that was one of my first constructed garments. And then off to the right is a little jumper that I also made all by myself, because once I had kind of worked through the steps and stages, I was eventually able to make for myself, and also including that big poofy scrunchie. And then this is Alyssa again, who was hiding behind Minnie Mouse earlier, in this little lemon dress that I made for her, that she then wore for a photo shoot. So I really always enjoyed finding fabrics and patterns. At the time I was using patterns to make some fun garments. So this is a slide of all kinds of things that I made for my wedding. So at the time I was quilting a lot, and I was really into the double wedding ring. And I knew that I wanted to make as much as I could make for my own wedding. So I made these little pin cushions, kind of sticking with my textile background. And I found this really great little poem that had to do with threads. So I don't remember exactly how many of these I made, but they were all different. And I was inspired by the blue and white china patterns. So I used all blue and white fabrics for everything. And then I researched some different types of ribbon, and I ended up sewing strips and strips of ribbon together to make these book covers for the program. And then the double wedding ring, I also made centerpiece placemats for all of the tables. So again, it was kind of, having this one idea and then figuring out all these different ways that I could expand upon it. The ring bearer pillow was made out of leftover silk fabric from the bridesmaid dresses. I believe that I was able to order some of that extra fabric. So that is what the ring bearer pillow is made out of. And the purse that I used for my wedding, believe it or not, I had the seamstress keep all the scraps that were trimmed off of the bottom of my dress. And then I made a design just based off of the pieces that I had left. I knew that I wanted just a very simple a simple bag. So I constructed the bag from the scraps of fabric, and then I lined it with the blue of the bridesmaid dresses so that there was my something blue. And then the hair pieces and the bouquet beaded clusters, those were also made by me. That, through trial and error, I found, the materials that would work, and I sat and twisted all the beads and then wired them and hot glued them to the clips. So this was kind of a beginning to end of just wanting to make everything out of some sort of textile based materials to put myself into my day. And then the bride and groom on the wine bottles, that was my grandmother's. Actually, those were her inspiration and idea, but it kind of goes with the theme, so I included those as well. But those were things that we would make those little wine bottle covers together when I would visit her. This is Sweet 16. I made these as a job for someone. They kind of just gave me the materials, gave me the little mannequins, and I had to sort of figure out how this was going to work. So that was these are just a couple little projects I was wanting to share using textile materials. The DLJ was also a wedding gift for someone, taking some silk fabric and some antique buttons. So I'm always kind of working with different materials, but there's always some kind of a textile included. And then off to the right, that was a wedding gift for my cousin, where I was able to print on the fabric the wedding date and some of the information pertinent to her wedding. And then I made some quilt squares and ended up framing this so that she would have that as a memory piece. These are a few of the baby things that I had started with. So again, kind of researching fabrics, figuring out what works together, making patterns. I had just purchased the bassinet basket, and then it was kind of up to me to figure out how I was going to make the different pieces to cover it. So there's a little bit of my sewing, my crochet, my upholstery, and my window treatment, and also a stuffy that I made, kind of. So this was just a package of another just grouping of things that I have made. And I know that this is not textile based, but this is a project that I worked on that I wanted to include just to show just another little piece of work that I have done. And then I know that I talked about the crocheted mermaid tail blankets in one of my other videos, but I wanted to include those again with these crocheted bags. So I had purchased this yarn. I really loved it. It was super soft. It was really, really fun. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with it. So I started to just kind of crochet it in a tube. And then I came up with this idea to make these handbags, and I went and I found these really great, like super fun, colorful prints. So this project is a combination of crocheting and sewing and me making a pattern. I remember I wanted the bottoms of the bags to be stiff, so I had cut some cardboard inserts that are between the layers of the crochet and the liner of these bags. So that's a little piece of that. And then these are some Halloween costumes that I made, all of which are really custom design. Every single year my kids kind of tell me what they want to be, and I figure it out. So I love having kind of that creative freedom of going to the fabric store, looking for fabric that is inspiring to go along with the theme. I started to use the fairy lights. A couple of the costumes have the fairy lights. The jellyfish were really, really fun to make. I started with a beach sun hat. and layered batting, and then I made a fabric lining, and then I made I wired the lights, and then I lined them on top. I covered them with an iridescent sheer fabric, and then I had to figure out how the lights were going to flow through the tentacles. So that was a super fun project. And then below is the fish that you can see are glowing. So I made a warm color fish for my daughter's friend and a cool color fish for my daughter, and wired those with lights. So that is a combination of sequin, lights, ribbon, there's felt. And I had to kind of figure out how to make the fish shape so that their bodies would fit in it and you would still see the fish. Down on the bottom in the black, my daughter is a spider, so I made her a backpack with some really fun black fur, and then I used these wired feather boas to make the spider legs, and then a really fun hat with the big eyeballs and some of the fairy lights again. And then my other daughter wanted to be a rainbow porcupine. So that costume is rainbow fur. And then I ended up making these tiny little slits, and the spikes of the porcupine were made with rainbow painted zip ties. So I painted all the zip ties, and then I zip tied to the actual fabric. So that costume was really pretty heavy. And I made it just like a vest, and I put a little Velcro on the front so she could close up the top. And then I took some fleece to make just a little beanie hat. And then I hand stitched more of the fur with the spikes onto the back of the hat. So that was really an original where I figured that one out. Just based off of the theme, the little elephant on the top, kind of the same thing. I made that pattern and kind of figured out how that was going to work. The witch was featured in my other video that I talked about the witch already, but I put her there since I made that costume. And then we have Rey from Star Wars again. I pretty much made that from scratch, just going to the store, figuring out what fabrics would work, and then making my own pattern. And the turtle also. I think I might have used a pattern for the bodysuit part, but the shell and all of the elements, I made those out of my imagination. Very often, my kids will have themed birthday parties. So again, going with the theme and doing a little bit of research into the fabric store online. I would source materials and then make the components. So one of my daughters had a cupcake birthday party where I made all of these fabric cupcakes, and some were favors, some were decorations. And then she's wearing a shirt and a skirt that I made. So that tutu was really I found some really fun fabric and then sort of just figured out how it was going to work and put that together. And the Minnie Mouse bows. One of my daughters, my little daughter, had a Minnie Mouse themed birthday, so I made all of the bows for favors for her friends. On the right, we had an Imagination Movers party, so I went and got all the t-shirts and made a custom t-shirt for each kid. So I really enjoy kind of making other people happy with the things that I make. So it was great to do, things where I'm giving, pieces of my work also. And then we have, I ended up getting an embroidery machine. So I started making some t-shirts for animals, and there's a custom t-shirt I made my daughter. And then Miranda Sings. My little daughter loves Miranda Sings. So I even went as far as to paint Miranda's lips on a mask when we were in the middle of COVID. It was the Halloween of COVID, where she had to wear a mask. So she's below with her costume and her little froze toes that I made. The pattern for, if you've ever seen that show, that's a classic part of Miranda's show. So there she is. And then there's my kids modeling a couple of my hooded bath towels. And then I found this picture of my older daughter when she was probably about 3 playing with my spools of thread. So I thought that was significant to include, because there is thread and supplies and all kinds of materials pretty much all over my house. And then I included a few pictures of my craft fair setup with all of my hair bows that I talked about in my previous video. So this is just kind of a compilation of a lot of my work all together on display for people to appreciate. The display had kind of evolved and changed based off of where I was going and how things, fit into my car. So I believe that that is also a part of the design process, and working with these types of materials, how do you put them on display for other people to see and appreciate them, and what works and what doesn't work. So I've used presentation boards, and I've used a clothing rack and other such means of figuring out how to display items for different types of shows. I have done wedding flowers in addition to my textile things, and along with one of my jobs, I made these headpieces for some flower girls. So this really goes more with my bow kind of stage of making the hair bows. So there's a bow and a gemstone, and I hand wound all of the flowers and the beads. So these were really a from scratch creation. And then this is just a close-up of some of my ribbon ones that when I was digging for pictures, I found those. And these were also kind of a self-invented design. The curl ribbon wraps around a wooden dowel, and it gets baked in the oven, I believe at like 2 or 250. I forget the exact formula for how to bake ribbon. And if you bake grosgrain ribbon, it curls. So that was kind of an experimentation, fun part of the process of making these wands, and figuring out how to attach the ribbon at the top to make them safe, and to make sure all the bits and pieces of what holds it together are then encapsulated in some additional spun ribbon to make them look good when they were complete. And then in addition to hair bows for kids, I've also made some hair bows for dolls. So I just included a couple of those here with tulle. Another one of the materials that I experimented with actually quite a bit with the hair bows and the tutus, and then the tutu bags that were in my other video. And then here is the beaded hair pieces again, just a close-up of just kind of an everyday color. I ended up making dozens of those to sell at my craft fair using all different types of beads. So these are a couple of pieces that I made for my old boss, Alexander Julian, when I worked for him. He is a menswear designer, if you're not familiar with his work. Was pretty dominant in the 80s-ish time frame, and he's still going strong today. I believe he still has some products out for sale in different places. He has a family shop down in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. But these were some pillows that I actually made for him for, I think, his home, where I used some of his buttons and some of our fabrics, and I came up with this design. And then on the left is a display that I created of all of his neckwear pieces for a show that we were doing. But I just wanted to talk about what I did for him, because my job with Alexander Julian, I worked for him for about 10 years in the field of textiles and designing fabric. So I worked on a CAD system called Euphoria, where I imported woven and knit textiles from Alex's sketches. So he would draw, how he wanted the yarns colored, how he wanted a specific plaid or a stripe. And then if it had any type of weave structure, plain weave, a dobby weave, a tabby weave, basket weave, and it was really kind of a great way to sort of expand my knowledge of just working with textiles to learning how they were actually created and how fabrics were woven and how fabrics were knitted. So I did that for about 10 years, and it really was just such a fantastic experience, kind of experiencing, the other side. I had always just made things, but now I was able to design the fabric to make things. And then while I was working at Alexander Julian, I started a window treatment business, and I had a lot of connections with fabric mills and distributors through working for Alex. My parents were in real estate at the time, so typically they would sell a house, give my name, and the person would call me, and I would go in and design and construct and install pretty much any type of soft goods that the homeowner wanted for their house. So this was a house that I did pretty much every single window in the whole entire house. So this is just an array of pillows, cushions, window treatments that were done for this particular person, where many times I was left to find the fabric or find choices. Every customer is kind of different versus it being open-ended versus me choosing. And then this is a bedroom in that same house where the person was very, very, very picky. So I was able to use my CAD skills to mock up the fabric into a variety of different choices before I actually constructed the curtains. So there's the choices that were given, and then on the photos you can see what I actually ended up making. And a few years after the fact, there was an automatic component that I had in the Roman shade that stopped functioning. So I went quite a few years later and restrung the mechanism that draws the shade. So I'm just going to flip through a couple of these images of some of the window treatments that I've done. This was a fun job. This was actually a sailboat. So there really is nothing that I am not willing to experiment with and try. This is a dining room, kitchen, and I was able to include my quilt making skills, which you can see here are, a lot more advanced than in the earlier slide that I showed you, to make some placemats. And then these next couple of slides, this is actually the main floor of a home that I did panels with some fun tassel fringe. And then this is the upstairs of the same home right above that downstairs living room. So the window configuration was the same. So it's kind of interesting to see the difference between two floors of the same home with the same window configuration. And then this is a few more Romans and cushions and valance and panel. This is just some more upholstery work that I did. And this is another cushion and pillows and treatment for a customer. And then this one actually was really special. This was super fun to make. It's a combination of silk and suede and tassel. And this was kind of a design and make, start to finish install. And this was in a cousin of mine's house. And unfortunately, they actually had a house fire a few years after the fact. And these poor curtains ended up having to get tossed after all the hours I put into constructing these. But they really were quite beautiful. And the off choice of color really worked well with the coloration of this room. A few more. This was This End Up furniture, which is super popular back quite a few years ago. So lots of people have gone through stages of needing to reupholster those. So these were some reupholstered cushions and pillows. Just some more window treatments. More window treatments. This was a house that was a joining room. So if you look at this picture over here in the middle, I had to figure out how to kind of make the window treatment the same, but distinguish the difference between the two rooms. So we decided to make the bow fabric color different to show the distinction between the two rooms, even though they were conjoining. This is some bedding that I constructed. So this duvet I made, all the throw pillows, and then this was the window treatment to coincide with that room. And then this, I also made this daybed cover with this window treatment for this room setup. And then this is another one where I made the quilts and the pillow and the window treatments, the valance and the panels. So really just a wide range of working with all different kinds of textiles and materials. This is an upholstered cornice that was for a condo. This is also another full house that I did, living and dining room, with the upholstered cornices, panels, and then these treatments with the pillows. Again, some panels. In this one, I even experimented with how to make this TV cart. And then I slip covered the bed, the pillows, and this was a kitchen with a quilted table runner. So I did the valances, the table runner, and then this was a bench with pillows. This was also a customer that I did so many pieces that there's a lot of stuff that I did for this same person. And then here's a few more where I reupholstered chairs, another table runner, valance. These are Romans and valances, and I reupholstered these chairs and did the cushion pillows for the benches. Let me see. This is a dust skirt. I found a picture of the backs of the Romans while I was making them, so I thought that was really interesting to see kind of the steps of the process in addition to the final pieces. And this off to the right here is a shower curtain. Another duvet and a bunch of throw pillows. This was an odd shaped pillow that I had to figure out how to make a pattern for it and cover it with some more window treatments. This was a bench, and I believe that I shipped this, that this person was far away, and I had to ship this, where they sent me a paper pattern with measurements. So that was really interesting, actually, trying to make something for a space that I hadn't actually seen. These are slip covers for pillows, slip covers for the chair back, and then these are the padded cushions. And then this is a Roman shade with the back and the front to show the details of all the handwork and hand stitching. And the boards, I had to figure out how to cover the boards so that you couldn't see any open seams, and then putting in the eye hook, and I hand stitch all the loops on the back, and then you have to balance all the strings so that when the shade is drawn, it pulls up evenly. And now I'm going to move on to some more of my advanced quilting, actually. So this one off to the left here was paper pieced, which was really, really super fun, where you work with sewing the fabric to paper, and it makes the star-shaped pattern. And then at this time, I was machine quilting my own quilts. So if you can see on some of these, this white one, actually, you can probably see it the best, that this is the double wedding ring again that I made for a wedding gift for a friend of mine. But because it's on the light fabric, you can see how I machine stitched it. And then I have one here that I was laying out and trying to play with where the colors should go before I was going to sew it together. And then there's some pillows, table runner, and the double wedding ring that I had done for my own is down here. And these are a couple of baby quilts, a few close-ups of the quilt I made for my friend. And then this is another one kind of in the works with all the steps of piecing the fabric together. And then this is how does it look before it gets all sewed together permanently. And then I have a couple of close-ups of the finished piece. And again, this one was also machine quilted by hand on my machine. This was a fun project that I did with a preschool class for a teacher gift. Also includes